A nurse was mocked for getting pregnant by a homeless man. Words that followed Mara Ellison everywhere now. In the hallway, in the stairwell, outside her own building. People repeated it like it was a joke they were owed. She kept walking, holding her bag close, ignoring the whispers about her choices and her future. But that morning, as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk outside her small Chicago apartment, the noise around her suddenly stopped. A black luxury SUV turned onto her street, moving slowly, deliberately, heading straight toward her. Its reason for being there impossible to guess. Mara Ellison had grown up on the south side of Chicago, in a narrow brick duplex that always smelled faintly of lavender detergent and radiator heat. Her grandmother, Lillian, raised her from the time she was 5 after Mara's mother left and her father disappeared into a series of county jails. Lillian didn't have much, but she carried a firm belief carved into the family like a quiet law. Hold your ground. Even if it trembles. Mara heard it whenever bills stacked too high, whenever teachers underestimated her, whenever life pushed harder than she could push back. By 27, she had become a registered nurse at Fairview Community Clinic, a place that looked tired but served people with nowhere else to go. The clinic was always full, patients in threadbare coats, mothers juggling paperwork, teenagers looking for a place that wouldn't judge them. Mara had never aimed for glamour. She just wanted to work where compassion mattered more than polished shoes. And even when the shifts were brutal, she felt a strange loyalty to the chaos. It reminded her of home, imperfect but human. Outside work, her life was simple. A tiny one-bedroom on a street with unreliable streetlights. A bus route she knew by heart. A bank account that hovered dangerously close to empty more often than not. She managed her days with careful budgeting and a stubborn pride she couldn't shake. She saved every extra dollar, every overtime hour, every scrap of dignity people tried to take from her. Her independence wasn't just a choice. It was survival. Her belief in treating everyone equally wasn't abstract, it was personal. Her uncle had been homeless for years before he vanished. Her neighbor relied on disability checks that never came on time. People talked about poverty like a character flaw, but Mara had seen too much to believe that. That was why, when a soft-spoken homeless man named Calvin Morrow came into the clinic one winter evening, shaking with fever and distrust, she didn't flinch. She helped him the way she helped everyone else, quietly, respectfully, without conditions. People later twisted that kindness into something else. But Mara didn't regret who she was or where she came from. In her grandmother's voice, she always found the same steady reminder, like a hand on her back. Hold your ground, even if it trembles. When Mara learned she was pregnant, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the test still in her hand, and felt the room tilt. She wasn't prepared financially, emotionally, or otherwise, but the decision came to her with a strange calm. She would keep the baby. Not because she had a plan, but because she refused to let shame or circumstance dictate her life. It was the one thing she could choose for herself. At the clinic, her supervisors talked often about restructuring, tightening budgets, cutting hours. Mara was already barely holding her schedule together. Losing even one shift would jeopardize everything: rent, prenatal care, bus fare, groceries. She kept a folded $6.25 in her wallet. A tiny emergency reserve. She refused to touch a private symbol of her ability to stand on her own feet. No matter the pressure, she hoped the pregnancy wouldn't change how people looked at her work. She hoped the clinic would see her as steady, dependable, essential. She hoped the father's identity wouldn't become gossip fodder. But she knew how fragile her position was. If judgment spread, if the wrong person made a decision, if rumors hardened into policy, her whole life could collapse in a matter of days. It started with a whisper in the break room, soft, careless, shaped like curiosity but edged with cruelty. Mara heard her name first, then the word pregnant, then a laugh muffled behind a paper cup. She kept her head down, sorting charts, pretending she hadn't heard. But whispers spread fast in a place where boredom mixed easily with bitterness. By noon, the rumor had grown legs. Someone claimed they'd seen her leaving the clinic late at night with a homeless man. Someone else embellished the story until it sounded like a scandal. Mara, the quiet nurse, sneaking around with patients, making reckless decisions, embarrassing the clinic. No one confronted her directly. They preferred to perform their judgment at a distance, behind corners and half-closed doors. The betrayal hit full force during the mandatory staff meeting. The clinic director, Dr. Rowan, stood at the front of the cramped room, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp behind expensive glasses. He wasn't a cruel man, but he had a talent for delivering a blow with professional polish. "We've had concerns brought to us," he said, scanning the room before landing on Mara. "Concerns about boundaries, about choices that could reflect poorly on this institution." Someone in the back snickered. Another nurse covered her grin. "With a water bottle of sparkling mineral water and unnecessary luxury in this neighborhood." Mara felt heat crawl up her neck. She opened her mouth to speak, but Rowan held up a hand. "Let me be clear," he continued, voice tightening. "Relationships with vulnerable patients are strictly prohibited, and becoming pregnant under unclear circumstances raises questions, serious questions." A hush fell. Every eye turned toward her. The humiliation was bright, sharp, impossible to swallow. "I didn't," she began. But the room erupted before she could finish. "I heard the father's that guy who sleeps behind the pharmacy," someone whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Guess charity has limits," another muttered. Mara felt her stomach knot. They weren't just questioning her professionalism, they were reducing her entire life to a rumor, a spectacle. The truth didn't matter here. Her work ethic, her long shifts, her loyalty to this place, none of it protected her now. She remembered her grandmother's voice, "Hold your ground, even if it trembles," but her ground felt like it was cracking beneath her feet. By the time the meeting ended, the hope she'd been clinging to, staying invisible, staying valued, staying safe, had been stripped away, piece by piece, in front of everyone. Grant Rourke had not expected chaos when he arrived at Fairview Community Clinic. His visit was meant to be simple, a quiet observational tour. His family's company, Rourke Medical Systems, was reviewing potential funding proposals, and Fairview was one of the clinics hoping to secure desperately needed grants. Grant was there to evaluate efficiency, workflow, and staff professionalism. The board trusted numbers. Grant trusted what he saw with his own eyes. He stood in the back of the small meeting room, unnoticed by most of the staff, holding a clipboard he didn't really need. He had grown up in the world of polished conference tables, marble lobbies, and curated presentations. This place, peeling paint, flickering lights, exhaustion lining every face, felt like an entirely different universe. Raw, unfiltered, honest in a way that made him uneasy. When Dr. Rowan brought up concerns, Grant assumed it was about budget compliance, but the moment the room shifted, the energy tightening around one person, he looked up and saw Mara Ellison. She didn't fit the picture he'd formed from her personnel file. On paper, she was quietly reliable, consistent hours, strong patient satisfaction reports, minimal disciplinary notes. But in person, she stood half shrinking, half defiant, her expression calm but her shoulders rigid. The tension in the room aimed at her was unmistakable, almost suffocating. Then came the comments, the whispers, the muffled laughter. Grant had attended enough corporate meetings to recognize what was happening. It wasn't a discussion. It was a public shaming dressed as protocol. He watched as Dr. Rowan framed unverified rumors as professional concerns. He watched the staff lean back, comfortable in the role of spectators rather than colleagues. He watched Mara try to respond, only to be silenced with a raised hand, something that would never have happened to a senior nurse, let alone someone of status. And he watched her face when a voice in the back joked about the father being the homeless man behind the pharmacy. Mara didn't flinch outwardly, but her eyes shifted just a fraction, a tiny break, the kind you'd only catch if you were paying attention. Grant caught it. It hit him harder than he expected. He'd seen embarrassment before. He'd seen professional conflict, but this was cruelty packaged as workplace concern. It wasn't policy being enforced. It was judgment disguised as leadership. He wrote nothing on his clipboard. The Grant evaluation suddenly felt irrelevant. What mattered was the imbalance he'd just witnessed. A room full of people with power pushing down on someone who clearly had none. Grant stepped a little closer as the meeting ended, observing the way people avoided Mara's gaze. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew injustice when he saw it. And something in him, something he didn't often listen to, told him this wasn't something he could just walk away from. As people shuffled out of the meeting room, Mara stayed seated, sorting papers that didn't need sorting, waiting for the last echoes of laughter to fade. Her hands were steady, but only because she refused to let them shake where others could see. The air still hummed with judgment, sharp, lingering, poisonous. She took a slow breath, repeating her grandmother's words in her mind like a thread holding her together. Then she heard footsteps stop in front of her. "Ms. Ellison?" Grant's voice was calm, even, but it carried through the room with a clarity that made several staff members pause at the doorway. Mara looked up. She recognized him from earlier. Expensive coat, clean lines, the kind of confidence that came from a life where doors opened before you touched the handle. She braced herself for another performance of pity, confusion, or quiet condescension. Instead, Grant turned slightly, looking not at her but at Dr. Rowan, who stood near the exit reviewing notes with two senior nurses. Grant's tone sharpened with a firmness that surprised the room. "I need clarification," he said. "Is it standard policy at Fairview to publicly address unverified personal matters during staff meetings?" Rowan blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Rourke, I assure you," Grant didn't let him finish, "because what I observed wasn't policy. It was a breach of professional conduct." The two nurses beside Rowan stiffened. A receptionist who'd been gathering forms froze mid-step. Everyone knew who Grant was. The Rourke family wasn't just wealthy, they funded half the medical equipment upgrades in the region. Their evaluations could make or break budgets. Rowan tried again, voice tightening. "We were addressing a concern about boundaries." "Boundaries?" Grant repeated, his voice calm but slicing through the room. "Or gossip." A ripple moved through the staff like a suppressed shock. Mara sat very still. This wasn't what she wanted. Attention was the last thing she could afford, but the words were out, and she couldn't pull them back. Grant continued, his posture structured, professional. "I'll need to include today's meeting in my assessment, not the rumor you're handling of it." Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else muttered a warning under their breath. Grant looked at Mara then, just for a second, steady, not pitying. "No staff member should be publicly humiliated based on hearsay. That's not leadership." Rowan's jaw clenched. "Mr. Rourke, if you feel there was a misunderstanding, there wasn't." Silence. Heavy, absolute. For the first time since the rumors began, the room tilted in Mara's direction, not kindly, not comfortably, but unmistakably. She felt exposed, protected, and uneasy all at once. Public help was a double-edged sword, and now every eye was on her, not with mockery, but with the simmering resentment that comes when someone unexpected disrupts the social order. Everything had just changed, and not necessarily in a way she could control. The summons came before Mara even finished her next shift. A terse message from Dr. Rowan, office, now, no explanation, no room to decline. His office sat at the end of the administrative hallway, a place most nurses avoided unless absolutely necessary. The carpet was thicker there, the walls cleaner. A framed certificate hung behind Rowan's desk, angled so visitors couldn't miss the prestigious institutions he'd come from. Mara stood in the doorway for a moment, steadying herself before stepping in. "Close the door," Rowan said without looking up. She obeyed. He finally lifted his eyes, adjusting his glasses with the controlled calm of someone preparing a lecture, rather than a conversation. "Do you have any idea," he began, "what position you've put this clinic in?" Mara frowned. "I haven't put anyone in any position." Rowan leaned back, folding his hands. "Your situation has already caused disruption. And now Mr. Rourke, someone whose evaluation we desperately need, believes we must handle internal matters. That wasn't because of me," Mara said, voice low but steady. "That was because of how the situation was handled." Rowan exhaled sharply. "Don't pretend you don't understand optics. You know how fragile funding is. The last thing we need is a staff scandal." Her stomach tightened. "My pregnancy isn't a scandal. It is when the father is a homeless man." The words landed bluntly, without hesitation. Mara stiffened. "That doesn't make my work any less valuable." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're naive if you think that's how the world sees it. There are expectations for professionalism. Perception matters. And right now, you're a liability. The word stung more than she expected. Liability, not employee, not nurse, not person. This clinic serves people who live through worse than rumors, she said, voice trembling only at the edges. You taught us compassion. You preach dignity. But when it's one of your own, Rowan slammed his palm lightly on the desk. This is not about dignity. This is about control, order. If every personal mistake becomes public knowledge, we lose authority. She met his eyes, anger rising like heat. A mistake? That's what you think this is. He didn't blink. Yes, and you need to correct it before it hurts the clinic further. For a moment, the room felt too small. Mara heard her grandmother in her memory again. Hold your ground, even if it trembles. She straightened, slow and deliberate. I won't apologize for keeping my child, and I won't be shamed into submission just because it's inconvenient for you. Rowan's expression hardened. Then don't expect special consideration when decisions are made. It won't be the first time I've stood alone, she replied. A fragile truce of silence hung between them, her defiance, his authority, neither willing to yield. When Mara left his office, her legs felt unsteady, but her ground trembling as it was held firm. By the time Mara stepped outside the clinic that evening, the sky over Chicago had turned the color of worn steel. The air felt heavy, thick with winter and unspoken judgment. Staff members passed her without a word, some avoiding her eyes, others shooting quick, irritated glances as if she had invited chaos into their orderly routines. She just wanted to get home, sit down, and breathe without feeling watched. But Grant was waiting near the bus stop. He stood rigidly, hands in his coat pockets, looking like he didn't belong anywhere near Fairview's cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps. When he saw her, he stepped forward. Mara, he said, we should talk. She kept walking. We don't need to talk. Yes, we do, he insisted, following. What happened today wasn't your business, she snapped. That stopped him. They were mistreating you. And you think calling them out in front of half the staff made it better? She turned, anger rising fast, sharper than she intended. You don't get to walk in for one day and decide you understand the dynamics here. Grant's expression tightened. I wasn't going to stand there and let them humiliate you. You don't even know me, she said. And I don't need rescuing. He let out a slow, incredulous breath. It wasn't rescuing. It was basic decency. In your world, maybe, she said. In mine, when someone like you steps in, it changes things. People don't get angry at you, they get angry at me. That's not fair, Grant said, frustrated. It's reality. Mara hugged her bag to her chest. Now they think I'm trying to get special treatment, or that I'm using you, or that you're using me. None of it helps. A shadow crossed his features. I wasn't offering charity, but that's how it feels, she said quietly. Like I can't fight my own battles. Grant looked away for a moment, jaw tight. I didn't intend to take your agency. I just couldn't stand what they were doing to you. The sincerity in his voice startled her, but it didn't soothe the sting. There's a difference, Mara said, between helping someone and speaking for them. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I can stand on my own. One gesture from someone with your influence can undo all of that. He flinched, not visibly, but enough for her to notice the pause. So you'd rather I said nothing? He asked softly. She hesitated. I would rather you let me choose when I need help. For a moment, neither spoke. Cars passed. A distant siren wailed. A train rattled somewhere far off. Finally, Grant nodded, slow and reluctant. Okay, I hear you. But the wound between them, pride versus intention, dignity versus privilege, remained raw, unsteady, unresolved. Mara stepped back toward the bus stop, heart pounding with exhaustion. Grant stayed where he was, watching her go, realizing for the first time that doing the right thing wasn't always simple, and that good intentions could still cause damage in worlds he didn't understand. 2 days later, the clinic's administrative bulletin appeared in everyone's inbox at 6:14 a.m. sharp. Mara skimmed it over a rushed breakfast, expecting more schedule cuts or policy updates. Instead, one line stopped her cold. Community Outreach Initiative. Assigned leads, Mara Ellison, RN. Grant Rourke, External Liaison. Mandatory partnership. Her stomach dropped. By noon, Grant arrived at Fairview with a folder under his arm and the uneasy look of someone bracing for impact. Mara waited for him in the small conference room, arms crossed, tapping her foot against the tile as she tried to hide her irritation. Rowan had explained the assignment to her earlier with polished neutrality. We need a coordinated program to appeal to donors. Mr. Rourke will oversee the external side. You know the patient base best. Set aside your disagreements. Translation, work together or your job grows even more fragile. When Grant entered, Mara didn't stand. She didn't smile. She didn't offer small talk. Asterisk.
He sat across from her carefully, as if sitting too firmly might set off another argument. I didn't ask for this assignment, he said quietly. Neither did I. A beat of silence. Then let's just get it done, he said. They opened their folders at the same time. The project required them to develop an outreach event in a wealthy neighborhood, an attempt to connect Fairview's struggling patients with better resources and to secure long-term donors. It was something neither could accomplish alone. Grant would handle the connections, the permits, the funding logistics. Mara would handle the health screenings, patient coordination, and all medical details. They spent the next hour debating everything: where the event should be held, how many volunteers were needed, what services should be offered, which demographics needed prioritizing. Class differences seeped into every decision. Grant suggested sparkling water stations for guests. Mara countered with, clean tap water aye. People don't need their poverty decorated. He proposed digital registration. She reminded him half their patients didn't own smartphones. She pushed practicality. He pushed presentation. Slowly, painfully, they found middle ground. By the time the meeting ended, the tension had shifted, not gone, not softened, but transformed into something sturdier. A working rhythm. A reluctant partnership built on disagreement, not avoidance. As they stood to leave, Grant paused at the door. You were right, you know, he said, about choosing your moments. Mara eyed him. You were right too, about basic decency. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't trust, but it was a beginning, whether either of them liked it or not. The outreach event took place on a bright Saturday in Lincoln Park, where joggers passed with earbuds in and parents pushed designer strollers that cost more than Mara's monthly rent. Grant had secured a polished outdoor pavilion with ease. One call, one signature, done. Mara spent the morning guiding volunteers, setting up blood pressure stations, and calming patients who felt out of place in such an upscale setting. By noon, the event was buzzing. Wealthy residents wandered through out of curiosity. Fairview's patients trickled in with hesitant steps. Mara moved between them like a bridge, steady and warm. Grant coordinated logistics with clipped efficiency, keeping donors comfortable, smoothing interactions, making sure the event looked like a success from every angle. Then a sudden commotion broke out near the registration tent. An older woman, clearly affluent, was scolding a thin teenage boy who'd accidentally bumped her. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, clutching her handbag as if he were a threat. The boy froze, embarrassed and shrinking. Mara recognized him instantly. Luis, a patient who'd struggled through homelessness and chronic asthma. Without thinking, she stepped between them. "Ma'am, he didn't mean any harm. He's here for the health screening." The woman scoffed. "People like him shouldn't be wandering around. This isn't a shelter." The words hit like a slap. Grant arrived just in time to catch the last sentence. His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, controlled but visibly rattled. "Everyone here has the right to be here. That was the entire point of this event." The woman bristled, recognizing his last name on his badge. "Well, I assumed you'd want to keep things respectable." Grant didn't raise his voice, but something in him cracked. Respect isn't determined by income. She huffed and walked off, offended. For a moment, only the winter wind moved. Luis looked up at Mara, ashamed. "Sorry," he murmured. "You did nothing wrong," she said firmly. When the boy walked away, Mara turned to find Grant staring at the ground, expression shadowed in a way she hadn't seen before. "That kind of thing happened to your patients often?" he asked quietly. "Every day," she replied. She said. He let out a breath that sounded heavier than it should. "I grew up thinking helping people meant writing checks and showing up to charities. I didn't realize how much of the world is built to exclude them." Mara studied him. "Your world has cages too. They're just padded." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "You're not wrong. Expectations, appearances. My father shaping every path before I even decide to walk it." They stood in silence, surrounded by two groups that rarely met except in carefully controlled environments. Two people from opposite worlds, each trapped, one by poverty, one by privilege. And for the first time, they understood that neither of them truly belonged to the place people assumed they did. The following Monday, Fairview held a follow-up meeting to discuss the outreach results. The room was full, staff, board members, and Rowan presiding with his usual stern poise. Mara stood near the back, prepared to be ignored as always. But Grant stepped forward before the meeting even began. "I want today's report to reflect something accurate," he said, loud enough that every murmured conversation stopped. "The outreach succeeded because of Miss Ellison's leadership. Her insight, not mine, made the event accessible and safe for everyone." A ripple moved through the room. Rowan stiffened. "Mr. Rourke, internal matters." "This isn't internal," Grant cut in. "This clinic mistreated a member of its staff based on rumors. I witnessed it, and I'm including that in my final evaluation." Gasps, quick glances. The power dynamic flipped instantly. Mara felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with recognition. Someone finally naming what everyone else denied. Grant turned, meeting her eyes once. "Courage is doing the right thing when it costs you something," he said to the room. "And Miss Ellison has been doing that long before any of you noticed." No one had an answer, not even Rowan. For the first time, Mara wasn't the one trembling. The room was. 3 days later, Mara stood again on the cracked sidewalk outside her apartment, the same place where whispers had once followed her like shadows. The cold wind pushed against her coat, but she felt steadier than she had in weeks. The meeting's fallout had been swift. Rowan issued a formal apology. HR launched a review of clinic conduct, and several staff members avoided her with a new, uneasy respect. Her hours were secured, her role reaffirmed, but this morning brought something else. A familiar black luxury SUV turned the corner, rolling slowly down her worn-out street. Just like the day everything changed. Except this time, no neighbors whispered. No stares burned into her. They watched, yes, but with curiosity, not cruelty. The SUV stopped in front of her. Grant stepped out, holding a small box, plain cardboard, nothing extravagant. "I'm not here on behalf of the company," he said. "This is personal." Mara hesitated before taking it. Inside was a set of prenatal vitamins and a simple handwritten note. "For your child's start, chosen by you, supported by no one's judgment." No signatures, no logos, no grand gesture, just respect. She closed the box gently. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "You held your ground. I'm just trying to learn how to do the same." The SUV door stayed open, an unspoken invitation, not to wealth, not to rescue, but to possibility. She didn't take it. She didn't need to. Mara stepped back toward her building, the morning light catching the edges of her breath. The same street, the same cracks in the pavement. But everything felt different, redefined. As she climbed the steps, She whispered her grandmother's creed under her breath. No tremor this time. Hold your ground, even if it trembles. And for the first time, her ground felt solid. Some stories don't end with triumph or applaud. Some end quietly, on a small street, with a simple act of respect that changes everything. Mara didn't rise because someone saved her. She rose because she refused to bend to shame, even when the world pushed hard. And sometimes that strength teaches others how to stand too. If this story moved you, reminded you of dignity, or made you look at someone differently, take a moment to share it. And if it made you feel something, anything at all, go ahead and like, subscribe, and stay for the next story.